Hi, this is Troy Hubble from YourDyslexiaExpert.com. I'm here today with another video. Again, I'm wearing a shirt from a video game from when I was a kid, The Oregon Trail. My shirt, which was made by my amazing wife, says, "Don't ford the river, just don't do it." If you've ever played that game, you know that when you get to a river, you can ford it. It's almost always a bad idea. You will lose oxen, you won't win the game. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. We're not here to talk about Oregon Trail, we're here to talk about dyslexia. So, in training I'm doing right now, I am studying through some speech to text programs. And I'll give credit. Dr. Marnie Ginsberg's Reading Simplified is the training I'm working on right now because there's some really good stuff. And as you know, I don't believe in any sort of a dogmatic approach to reading. I think that if you think you know everything about reading and teaching, that's the day you should quit, because it is impossible to actually know everything. And so I'm always sharpening my skills and incorporating more and more and more into my practice so that I can do the best possible work for students. I talked about her a little bit and linked her in another video. But one thing that I came across in this training that got me thinking, because I haven't come across this study in a good while, is a study by Dr. Anderson in 1992. And what Dr. Anderson discovered is probably should be the most obvious fact in the world to all of us. And yet, despite the obvious nature of this fact, we continue to perpetuate exactly this problem. Essentially, he discovered that students who have higher achieving in reading, wait for it, read more. Right? Seems obvious. If you read more, you will be better at reading. Your reading achievement will be higher. But we continue oftentimes to persist in an environment, in schools in particular, where students are not getting enough time to read. And we also know that when students struggle to read, they are not going to be able to read as much or as complicated of text as their peers. And that can turn what begins as a small problem in the form of dyslexia. Not that dyslexia is a small problem, but it's isolated to one process, phonological awareness, and turns it into an everything problem because they're not accessing enough language, enough vocabulary, enough all of those complicated things that we get from text that are very important. And that ultimately becomes an oral language problem. And oral language problems affect everything. So he measured reading achievement and compared that to how many minutes per day students spent reading. The 98th percentile of reading achievement spent a little bit more than 67.3 minutes per day. If you extrapolate that per year, look at the volume of text that becomes. I got this from the Department of Education. I am not sure exactly where they got some of these numbers. This seems a little extreme. I don't know anyone who's read this many books. I imagine this is talking about words. Either way, I'll also link the full study so that you can read it. But essentially, as we go down in reading achievement, we see that students are spending less and less and less time reading. And this becomes sort of a bind when we think about reading instruction, because we know that the students who are struggling the most really need a lot more explicit, a lot more direct, a lot more focused instruction. But when that instruction comes at the cost of practice, it can actually begin to do harm. There always has to be a balance between the amount that we instruct and the amount that students practice, which is why, in my opinion, the best reading lesson is the lesson in which the student does most of the talking and most of the reading. But even besides that, if you have a student, if you have a child, if you have dyslexia, if you have a friend who has dyslexia, Helping solve this problem so that a dyslexia problem does not, through the Matthew effect, become an everything problem is of critical importance. The amount of time spent in front of a book is directly responsible for so much of language development and so much of achievement throughout a person's school life and professional life and everything that they do, that we really have to take this seriously. I will link the study if you want to read it more, but suffice it to say, more time spent in front of a book directly correlates with more and higher reading achievement. So, even for beginning readers, here are some ways that we can get kids spending more time in front of a book. So, number one, books, books, books. As soon as students are able to read independently enough that they can manage their way through any sort of a book, the most important thing that we can do for our students, for our children, for our friends, for ourselves is get books in front of them that they care about. I cannot stress enough how beneficial it is to find books at the beginning, any kind of books. As they get older or as they get better at reading, we want to look for more chapter book sort of books. But really, any kind of book that is going to draw in a child's interest. Because if they are interested in it and they are motivated to read it, rather than making them spend time in front of books, we can allow them to spend time in front of books, and they will seek that information out all on their own. Finding books that students like is one of the most important things that can be done to help a struggling reader as they begin to read well enough to access those books. Before they can access those books, decodable text is going to be absolutely critical. Decodable text is text that is built only out of, or at least mostly out of, very high frequency words and the sounds that students already know. Even for those early readers, we can build decodable text, or we can use decodable text that puts words in front of them that they're going to be able to read. We do not want students who have no concept of how to read words or who are going to be guessing at words to be practicing bad habits in books. We want always to be reinforcing that reading is a process of sounding words out, of connecting sounds to letters, not a process of memorizing words and not a process of guessing at words from context. Decodable text is a really good way to do that. And benefits from rereading the same text turn out to be really significant, especially when we start talking about building automaticity, the ability to sound out words and understand them automatically. And when we start talking about fluency. Fluency is how easy and accurately we can read our way through a text. So it turns out that decodable text and some of those easier books that students might have read are absolutely beneficial even if the students are rereading them. And in fact, reading those again is a great way to get students in front of text more in a way that's giving really beneficial practice. One word of warning here, and I did put this in another video I made, some reading programs give students pattern books as beginning books. And pattern books are things where you get the same sentence or the same sentence structure over and over again. And students are supposed to use the pictures to figure out the one word that's changing. So it might say, I went to the fair, I went to the carnival, I went to the airport. Pattern books are not good books to put in front of students because what pattern books teach is that looking at the picture and paying attention to the context is how we're going to read that word that's changing. That is a really terrible habit, and in fact, the only readers who read that way are poor readers who haven't been taught the proper way to read. So be careful with that, but as long as they are sounding their words out, I'm always very comfortable with students fighting their way through a more difficult text. We just don't want them to practice bad habits, and I would avoid those pattern texts. So decodable text is a really easy thing to do for beginning readers, and it doesn't have to be a whole book. It can be just sentences or phrases or whatever it is that you have that you can practice. You can work with whomever is teaching your child about reading on where to get these and how to do that. Another way that you can get time in front of text with your kids is what I would call shared reading. For shared reading, and if you go online, you'll find many specific procedures and definitions for that. So I'm going to clarify what I mean. Look at a book together with your child. When you get to when you get to books, when you get to words that your child knows how to sound out, let them read those words, and then you read the rest. And you can also say, hey, this word begins with a B. What letter or what sound is it going to start with? B. Yeah, that's exactly right. This is a way where you can take up a lot of the burden, but you're still accessing and practicing that text together. And last, but absolutely not least, and this is the first recommendation that I make to any parent who asks me how to help their kids, read out loud to your kids. Again, read out loud to your kids. You can read chapter books from when you were young. You can read anything you want. The ideal is that it's above their level and it's something that's interesting to both of you. This becomes a valuable bonding time. It becomes a time to build a love of reading. And while it won't necessarily be practicing decoding, it becomes a time, even for struggling readers, to get access to the vocabulary and language that they are not yet able to access on their own. Teachers can tell, I say this as a 14-year veteran teacher, immediately when parents read to their kids and when they don't, because of how that presents in the oral language of their children. Children who have been read to and are being read to learn everything else so much faster because their language is so much stronger. So if you forget everything else from this video, remember that. Read to your kids. Read a chapter a night and just enjoy it and talk about it. As always, if you would like to know more about dyslexia or about how to help your struggling reader, please respond in the comments or reach out to me on my website. Same as always, if somebody you know is struggling, reach out. I'm here to help. You can fill out the form on my website. We'll get in touch and we'll work together. And as always, too, have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a wonderful time with whatever you're doing. And like and subscribe so that more people can find this channel and learn how to help the struggling readers in their life. Thank you very much. Bye.